Imagine waking up one morning to find your neighbors whispering as you walk by. By sunset, you've been accused of serving the devil. There is no evidence, no crime scene, and no witness who actually saw you commit anything. Just a frightened child claiming your ghost appeared in the night. And somehow that's enough to sentence you to death. This isn't the plot of a horror movie, and it isn't medieval Europe. This happened in colonial America. In 1692, the quiet Puritan village of Salem became the center of one of history's most infamous episodes of mass hysteria. Over the course of a single year, more than 200 people were accused of witchcraft. 30 were found guilty. 19 innocent people were hanged. One man was pressed to death beneath heavy stones, and several others died waiting in prison. For centuries, the Salem Witch Trials have been remembered as a story about witches, but the truth is far more disturbing. They weren't really about witches. They were about fear, power, religion, suspicion, and a society so desperate to explain its suffering that it turned against its own people. This is the true story of the Salem Witch Trials. To understand why Salem happened, you first have to understand the world these people lived in. The settlers of Salem were Puritans, English Protestants who believed they had been chosen by God to build a pure Christian society in the New World. Their religion shaped every aspect of daily life. Church attendance was mandatory, strict moral rules governed the community, and breaking those rules could lead to severe punishment. But perhaps the most important thing to understand is that the Puritans genuinely believed the devil was real, not as a symbol or a metaphor, but as an active force working every day to corrupt humanity. They believed demons existed, curses were real, and witches were ordinary people who had made a pact with Satan. If crops failed, if disease spread through the village, if livestock died unexpectedly, or if a child suddenly became ill, many believed dark supernatural forces could be responsible. Life in colonial New England was already filled with hardship. Families endured harsh winters, food shortages, frequent disease outbreaks, and violent frontier conflicts that forced refugees into nearby settlements. Political uncertainty added even more tension after the Massachusetts Bay Colony lost its original charter, leaving many colonists anxious about the future. Fear wasn't unusual. It had become part of everyday life. And history has shown that when fear becomes constant, people often begin searching for someone to blame. That search began during the winter of 1692. 9-year-old Betty Paris, the daughter of Salem's minister, and her 11-year-old cousin Abigail Williams suddenly began behaving in ways no one could explain. They screamed uncontrollably, collapsed onto the floor, twisted their bodies into painful positions, and claimed invisible spirits were attacking them. Local doctors examined the girls but found no obvious physical illness. Unable to explain their condition, one physician suggested they had been bewitched. In a deeply religious society that already believed Satan walked among them, that diagnosis spread like wildfire. Soon the girls were pressured to identify who had supposedly cursed them. They named 3 women: Tituba, an enslaved woman from the Caribbean who lived in the minister's household; Sarah Good, a homeless beggar who wandered from house to house asking for food; and Sarah Osborne, an elderly woman who had become unpopular after disputes over property and inheritance. It's worth noticing that none of these women held power or influence. They were outsiders, vulnerable members of society who could easily be blamed without much resistance. Authorities arrested all 3. During intense questioning, Tituba confessed to practicing witchcraft and claimed the devil had many servants living in Salem. Historians still debate whether her confession was genuine or whether she simply said what her interrogators wanted to hear to save her own life. Either way, the damage was done. Instead of calming people's fears, her confession convinced the town that witches truly existed among them. If one witch had confessed, then surely there had to be more. The accusations spread with terrifying speed. Neighbors accused neighbors, friends accused friends, children accused adults. Even respected members of the church found themselves under suspicion. No one was truly safe. Around 3/4 of those accused were women, but the reasons went far beyond superstition. Puritan society expected women to be quiet, obedient, and submissive. Women who challenged authority, inherited valuable property, spoke their minds, or simply didn't fit society's expectations could quickly become targets. Some of the accused were widows who controlled land without husbands. Others had long-standing disputes with neighbors. In many cases, accusations of witchcraft became a convenient way to settle personal grudges or eliminate social outsiders. Not every victim was a woman. One of the most famous was Giles Corey, an elderly farmer who refused to enter a plea when he was arrested. Under English law, a trial couldn't proceed unless the accused pleaded guilty or not guilty. To force him to answer, officials laid Corey on the ground and slowly piled heavy stones onto his chest. For 2 agonizing days, they demanded he speak. According to tradition, his only response was, "More weight." He died without ever entering a plea, protecting his family's property from government seizure. His death remains one of the most brutal judicial killings in American history. What made Salem especially terrifying wasn't simply that people were accused. It was the evidence the court accepted. Judges relied heavily on something known as spectral evidence. If someone claimed your spirit had appeared in a dream, attacked them while they slept, or tormented them invisibly, that testimony could be accepted as proof of witchcraft. Think about that for a moment. How do you prove your spirit wasn't somewhere? How do you defend yourself against an invisible accusation? You can't. The legal system made innocence nearly impossible to prove. Every confession produced more accusations. Every accusation created more fear. Every execution convinced the town that the devil was becoming even more active. The trials became a cycle that fed itself. For more than 3 centuries, historians have asked the same question. What actually caused the strange behavior that started all of this? The honest answer is that no one knows for certain. Some researchers believe the girls experienced psychological distress brought on by the enormous pressures of Puritan life. Others have suggested conditions such as conversion disorder, where emotional trauma produces real physical symptoms. Another famous theory proposed that contaminated rye, infected with a fungus called ergot, may have caused hallucinations or convulsions. While fascinating, most historians today consider that explanation unlikely because the evidence doesn't fully match the symptoms or the timeline. It's also possible that some of the girls exaggerated their accusations after realizing the extraordinary attention and authority they suddenly possessed. Whatever the exact cause, historians overwhelmingly agree on one crucial point. There is no credible evidence that actual witchcraft took place in Salem. The tragedy was entirely human, fueled by religious extremism, fear, social tension, political instability, and personal rivalries. By the fall of 1692, even Salem's leaders began to realize the trials had spiraled out of control. Too many respected citizens had been accused. Too many innocent people had died. Governor William Phips dissolved the special court overseeing the witchcraft cases and prohibited the use of spectral evidence. A new court reviewed the remaining cases under stricter legal standards, leading to the release or acquittal of most of the remaining prisoners. The hysteria finally came to an end, but the damage had already been done. In the years that followed, many judges admitted they had made terrible mistakes. Some jurors publicly apologized for their role in the trials. The colony eventually compensated several of the victims' families, and over time, the convictions were overturned, though the final legal exonerations of all those convicted would take centuries to complete. But no apology could restore the lives that had been taken. Today, the phrase witch hunt is used around the world to describe situations where fear, rumor, or public pressure replace evidence and justice. That expression exists because of Salem, not because witches were ever found, but because ordinary people convinced themselves they were protecting their community while destroying innocent lives. The Salem Witch Trials remain one of history's clearest warnings about what can happen when fear becomes stronger than reason, when accusations matter more than facts, and when society decides someone must be guilty before the evidence is even considered. More than 300 years later, Salem still isn't remembered because of magic. It's remembered because it revealed something far more frightening about human nature. The greatest danger wasn't witches. It was what fear, suspicion, and unchecked belief could make ordinary people do to one another. If you enjoyed uncovering the darker truths hidden behind history's greatest myths, make sure to subscribe to Lost Eras and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode.